Jack and Sophie are the most popular names for Irish newborns over the last 12 months, according to the Central Statistics Office, which normally releases a raft of boring statistics, but these ones are semi-interesting. For honourable mentions too are Sean, Daniel, James, Connor, Emily, Sarah and Lucy. Tyler, Sebastian, Daithí and Alfie appear in the top 100 boys' names for the very first time, and Lily, Sophia and Lena stick their newly born heads over the 1-ton parapet for the first time as well. But what do these names actually mean? Well, John Gallagher joins us from childsname.net is the website. John, you're very welcome to the programme.
Good afternoon.
What is it you do?
Well, we publish a series of books for children about their first names. We have a total of over 30 books, and they deal with the most popular names in the country at the moment for boys and girls. And it's a story for the young children and also facts about the origin and meaning of the name for parents or for bigger people.
Right, interesting. So if we were to examine, say, the top 5 boys' names initially, and Jack and Sean are in there, and you could argue they're both derived from John. So what would be the meaning behind the name?
Well, they are indeed versions of John. And John itself is an old Hebrew name that means God is gracious. And the name itself was very popular back in the middle part of the 20th century, but is declined somewhat now, although it still would be a top 20, top 30 name. But Sean and Jack have taken over very much as the replacement names for those. I'm not sure whether it's Jack Charlton or what, but it has become the most popular name in the country and in the Midlands.
Yeah, there are quite a few celebrity Jacks, all right.
There are a lot of Jacks. I think people do draw from celebrities and from popular names. But Jack also is traditionally associated with children. It's found in nursery rhymes. And it's also associated with mischievousness, the Jack in the playing cards.
Jack the Lad and so on.
Jack the Lad, Jack and Jill, Little Jack Horner. It's associated with that. Even the jackdaw, the bird, the jackdaw, which is renowned for causing trouble in chimneys. It all builds up with associations for that name.
So you had all these connotations coming together, and you get the impression of this little rascal running around for the entire of his life.
That's probably the real reason why it remains popular with parents.
James is, again, another fairly traditional name which features quite often.
James is an interesting name because it has remained popular throughout the decades and indeed the centuries. And it's popular not just in Ireland, but indeed it's one of the few names that you find throughout Europe as a top name. And it is a version of Jacob, which means God rewards. And it has stayed in the top 5 in Ireland since statistics came out in 1998-99 for the first time. But I think it would be true that it has been popular back over the decades.
How many of these names have some origin to do with God and religion?
Well, a lot of our names go back to saints, religion, the Bible, to old Greek names, and really what we have in modern terms is some of those become translated. For instance, Catherine would have traditionally been a very popular name. Now, Katie has replaced that to a larger extent, but it's still based on the old religious link going back over the centuries. And the likes of Sophie as well would have strong religious connotations for morality. And Sophie, for instance, in Greek legend and Roman legend, was the mother of faith, hope and charity. So it's funny how people, although religion has somewhat declined in the country, still go back to names that have some meaning or some value to convey to their child.
Perhaps unwittingly, though, not realising it.
I think so. Well, I know when we had our children, we pored over baby name dictionaries to find the meaning of names, and I think parents do pay some attention to it. They may nowadays be a bit more influenced by a celebrity or sports stars, but I think there is still a commitment to finding a name for the child that actually will give them some confidence and some status and some feeling of independence in what they are.
Daniel is also in the top 5 boys' names, and other than Daniel O'Donnell, I can't really think of anything saintly about Daniel.
Well, I think Daniel is probably one of. It is an old name from the Bible. Daniel was thrown into the lion's den, and I think that's the origin of Daniel from biblical terms. But
it's a bit of a dubious start to give your child in the world, isn't it?
Well, I think there's a huge number of Daniels around that are probably like you've Daniel Craig from Casino Royale.
Yeah, James Bond. Yes.
You've Daniel Radcliffe in Harry Potter. You've Daniel Day-Lewis, who won the Oscar with My Left Foot. You've Daniel O'Donnell, the country and western singer. So there's a lot of different Daniels coming at you when you're almost certain in there to have some link with the name Daniel that's of interest to you from either music or history or the movies. And subliminally, I suppose the name sticks in your mind then as an option for your child when it's born.
Taking a look at some of the first-time entries in the top 100, Lily, again, a derivative of Elizabeth, I suppose. Sophia is very similar to Sophie. Looking on the boys' side, though, Tyler. Where did Tyler come from?
Well, a lot of names surface, and it's difficult to exactly know why they become popular at any given time. Ava, for instance, was a name that appeared in the Irish top 10 nationally a few years ago, almost from nowhere, but it's now rapidly slipping out of knowledge again. Tyler, which you're asking me about, is really an American name, and it actually doesn't really have any meaning as such. It's a surname essentially in America that just began to be adopted as a first name, maybe because it sounds good.
So it would be an example of where modern trends lead to names being accepted in popular culture.
Yeah. There doesn't seem to be any historical origin for Tyler that can be easily identified, other than that it was around as a surname. Now, a lot of surnames originally developed back in the Middle Ages from people's occupation. So, for instance, the surname Tyler may have been from a family or a guild associated with floor tiling, and that became a surname. And it may be as simple as that, but that's the origin of the name. But I'd welcome if any reader can enlighten me on that. Certainly from any research I have on Tyler, there's no clear linkage as to where it has come from.
John, I'm not sure how comfortable you are operating off the cuff, but we have been inundated with people asking, what does this name mean? What does that name mean? Are you familiar with Saskia?
Saskia, I'm not. No, it's obviously a new one on me. I know it was linked to Rembrandt, I think, if I remember it was his wife's name, but I'm afraid I can't give the meaning of it.
Well, a dad is under the impression that is linked to protector of mankind, which is quite an arduous task, and she's going to be busy, young Saskia, if she's going to protect all of mankind.
Yeah. I think it's a German root. There's a number of German names that have the words Kia or Skia in them, and I imagine that probably is the origin of it. It may be just a variation on a spelling of a German original name.
Or else a Korean car.
Well, let's not lumber the young girl with Korean car linkages.
No, I'm not going to be popular now, am I? Niamh. What about Niamh?
Well, Niamh is a reasonably popular name in Ireland. It doesn't exist much outside of Ireland. It's obviously, it means brightness, and Niamh, of course, is associated with the children of Lear, and she was the woman from Tiernan who came and convinced Oisin to go with her to his downfall eventually. It's quite an interesting name, linked to Cuchulainn and there were actually a number of Niamhs in Irish mythology, but the Tír Nóg Niamh is the one that I think most people associate Niamh with today.
Daithí. A few people have asked about Daithí, and I'm assuming since it is also in the top 10 now as one of the new arrivals, would Daithí O'Shea be taking some credit for its popularity?
I think, well, Daithí O'Shea is the only person I can think of with the name off the top of my head. I think probably you have to put that down as the explanation. Daithí has been very popular on a number of TV shows, and I think you'd have to say that can be the only justification you could offer. Although sometimes these names do just crop up. People look around for Irish names, they see Daithí and decide it sticks with them. So we'll see if it survives Daithí O'Shea's own popularity.
I would imagine your job becomes a lot more complicated the more diverse our society becomes. In other words, that when we have immigration, say, from Eastern Europe or from Africa or from wherever, that the names won't be as traditional. How on earth do you research their origins?
Well, I suppose we do, to an extent, have to limit. Certainly, the books are limited to the more popular names for the moment, because there's an economics involved in trying to produce books for names that are very, very rare. But it is true that names are becoming much more diverse. 20, 30, 50 years ago, there was a much greater concentration on a smaller number of names. People, for instance, would be named after their parents or after the uncle or the aunt. And even going back through the centuries, the same name would have been given to a number of people in the same family. You would have John the Elder and John the Younger, for instance, back in the Middle Ages. So it's really only in the last 10, 20 years that people are spreading out, and because of this idea of personal identity becoming more important for people, I think they want to give their children a very distinctive name, so they look for new spellings, new names. And as you say, with the increasing level of immigration into Ireland in the past decade, people are coming up with new names. If people from Eastern Europe marry somebody from Ireland, they're likely to suggest a European name or an option for their children. So I think that's giving us a lot of new names to have in our country.
One last question, and it comes from somebody who says it's not strictly related to the topic, but John might know the etiquette here. What happens when somebody with a double barrel name marries another person with a double barrel name? Say, I'm trying to think of people now. Say Richard Boucher Hayes marries Tara Palmer Tompkinson. What do you come up with then?
Yeah, I think you come up with a problem, basically.
You do, don't you?
Yeah, I'm not a surname expert. I hope I never have to confront that one, and I'm afraid I'll have to pass on that one.
Yes, plead the fifth. Childsname.net is the website. John Gallagher, thanks for taking our call today.
Could I just finally say that the books are on sale in bookshops as well, and for instance in Tullamore they're available through Balcony Books. You probably know in O'Connell Square there. If anybody is looking for a copy for a birthday, or even pre-ordering for Christmas.
Great, and in good bookshops right across the region as well, no doubt.
Yeah.
John Gallagher, thank you, a pleasure.